Sarah thought parking legally would keep her safe from trouble. She was wrong. When neighborhood enforcer Karen Martinez spotted Sarah's pristine Honda Civic in the visitor's space, she didn't see a parked car, she saw an opportunity for destruction. What Karen did next would ignite a war that would consume both their lives, expose deadly secrets, and prove that sometimes the victim becomes the villain's worst nightmare. The rain drummed against the windshield like angry fingers as Sarah Chen maneuvered her Honda Civic into the visitor parking space at Willowbrook Apartments. She checked her phone 11:47 p.m. Perfect. Late enough that most residents would be asleep. Early enough that she wouldn't look suspicious. She killed the engine and sat in the darkness for a moment, watching the amber streetlights cast wavering shadows through the rain-streaked glass. The visitor space sat directly under a functioning street lamp, clearly marked with fresh white paint. Legal, legitimate, exactly where it was supposed to be. Sarah grabbed her overnight bag from the passenger seat and sprinted through the downpour toward Building C, where her boyfriend Marcus lived. The rain soaked through her jacket within seconds, but she couldn't stop the smile spreading across her face. 3 months of long-distance dating, and she was finally spending the weekend in his city. She made it to the covered entrance and shook the water from her hair, then pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. "Hey, beautiful." Marcus's voice crackled through the intercom. "You made it." "Barely. This storm is insane." The door buzzed open, and Sarah hurried inside, her sneakers squeaking against the polished lobby floor. The elevator carried her to the 3rd floor, where Marcus stood waiting in his doorway, wearing that lopsided grin that had made her fall for him during their college orientation 3 years ago. "God, you're soaked," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Worth it." She kissed him, tasting coffee on his lips. "Were you waiting up?" "Couldn't sleep, knowing you were driving in this weather." He grabbed her bag and led her inside. "How is the parking situation? I know visitor spots fill up fast." "Actually got lucky. There was one right under the streetlight by building a." Marcus paused, his hand on the light switch. "Wait, which building, eh?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Nothing, just thought you meant the ones by my building. Want some tea? You look frozen." Sarah studied his face. Something in his expression made her stomach tighten. "Marcus, what's wrong with parking by building?" "And nothing's wrong. Exactly, it's just ... He ran a hand through his dark hair. "There's this woman who lives there, Karen Martinez. She's kind of the unofficial parking police of the complex. Gets weird about the visitor spaces." "Weird how?" "Like takes pictures of cars she doesn't recognize. Calls the towing company if she thinks someone's been there too long. The property manager told her to back off, but she keeps doing it anyway." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. How long is too long? That's the thing, there's no actual time limit posted, but Karen seems to think overnight parking is forbidden. Marcus wrapped his arms around her. "Look, don't worry about it. You're parked legally. She can't do anything." But as Sarah let Marcus pull her toward the couch, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was wrong. 3 floors down, and 2 buildings over, Karen Martinez stood at her kitchen window, binoculars pressed to her eyes. The rain made it difficult to see clearly, but she'd watched the young woman park the Honda and run toward Building C. Karen glanced at her. Watch 11:52 p.m. Overnight parking in visitor spaces. Against the rules. Never mind that the lease agreement said no such thing. Never mind that the property manager had explicitly told her to stop harassing visitors. Karen Martinez knew what she knew, and what she knew was that this complex had standards. She lowered the binoculars and picked up her phone, scrolling to the photos she'd taken of the Honda's license plate before the rain got too heavy. Colorado. Plate's not local. Definitely an overnight visitor. Karen opened her laptop and logged into the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group she'd created 6 months ago. Membership herself and 3 other residents who'd stopped participating after her posts became increasingly aggressive. She began typing. Illegal overnight parking alert. Non-resident vehicle Honda Civic. Colorado plates GHM 7394 currently occupying visitor space. Number Y, by Building A. This is a clear violation of community standards. Property management has been notified. Towing company will be contacted if vehicle remains past 6 a.m. She posted it, then opened a new browser tab and navigated to Summit Towing's website. Their 24-hour service promised fast, reliable vehicle removal. Karen bookmarked the page. But as she reached for her phone to take more photos for evidence, her laptop chimed with a notification. Someone had commented on her post. Janet Wilson. "Karen, there's no overnight parking restriction in our lease agreement. I checked mine after your last post about the Hernandez family's guests. Maybe we should let people park legally without harassment." Karen's jaw clenched. Janet Wilson in 2C, always stirring up trouble with her facts and lease agreements. The woman had no vision, no understanding of what it took to maintain a quality living environment. She typed back, "The lease agreement is the minimum standard. Janet, those of us who care about property values understand that overnight visitor parking leads to noise, loitering, and security issues. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem." Karen hit send, then immediately opened a second post. Update on illegal parking situation. Vehicles still present as of 12:15 a.m. Owner appears to be visiting Building C. This is exactly the kind of inconsiderate behavior that drives down property values and attracts undesirable elements to our community. She attached the photos of the Honda, making sure the license plate was clearly visible. Her phone buzzed with a text from her ex-husband. Miranda's recital is Sunday at 2. Please don't miss this one. Karen deleted the message without responding. She had more important things to worry about than her daughter's piano recital. Someone was flagrantly disrespecting the community standards she'd worked so hard to establish. She grabbed her rain jacket and flashlight. Time for a closer inspection. The storm had intensified by the time Karen reached the visitor parking area. Rain pelted her face as she approached the Honda, flashlight beam dancing across the wet asphalt. She circled the vehicle slowly, looking for any violation she could document. The car sat perfectly centered in the space. No part of it crossed the yellow lines. The parking permit on the dashboard showed today's date: Marcus Williams, 3B. Everything appeared to be in order, but Karen knew better than to trust appearances. She knelt beside the front tire, rain soaking through her jacket knees. The tire looked properly inflated, no obvious defects. She moved to the rear tire, then the other side, nothing she could use. Frustrated, she stood and wiped rain from her eyes. There had to be something. People who parked overnight in visitor spaces were the type who cut other corners too. Bad registration, expired insurance, mechanical violations, something that would justify calling the authorities. Karen pressed her face against the driver's side window, shining her flashlight into the interior. The car was immaculate. No trash, no obvious personal items, no evidence of the careless lifestyle she expected from someone who would dare park overnight in her complex. But then her light caught something on the dashboard. A small air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. Karen's pulse quickened. Most states had laws about objects obstructing the driver's view. She pulled out her phone and took several photos of the air freshener, making sure to capture its position relative to the mirror and windshield. She Googled Colorado air freshener obstruction laws and found exactly what she needed. State statute 424227 prohibited hanging objects that might impair the driver's vision. Karen smiled for the first time in hours. She had her violation. She scrolled through her contacts and found the non-emergency police number. After 3 rings, a tired voice answered. Police dispatch. How can I help you? This is Karen Martinez at 1247 Maple Street, Willowbrook Apartments. I need to report a vehicle code violation. There's a car parked in our visitor area with an obstructed windshield hanging air freshener that clearly violates state safety standards. Ma'am, is this an emergency? It's a safety violation. The driver could cause an accident. A long pause. Ma'am, unless the vehicle is currently being driven or is parked illegally, we can't issue citations for equipment violations on private property. Karen's grip tightened on the phone. So you're telling me that someone can break state law as long as they're not driving at that exact moment? Ma'am, I understand your concern, but we have limited resources for non-emergency situations. If the vehicle is legally parked and not currently being operated, this is exactly what's wrong with law enforcement today. Karen ended the call, rain and fury making her hands shake. She stood there for a moment, water dripping from her hair, staring at the Honda with pure hatred. The police wouldn't help. The property manager was useless. But Karen Martinez didn't get to be the most respected resident of Willowbrook Apartments by giving up when obstacles appeared. She walked to her own car, a pristine white BMW, that she parked in her assigned space every day, and opened the trunk. Inside, beneath her, Detective Ray Castellanos had seen enough crime scenes to know when something didn't add up. Marcus Williams lay sprawled across his living room floor, a kitchen knife protruding from his chest, blood pooling beneath his body like a dark mirror. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle beyond the fatal encounter, but it was the girlfriend's story that bothered him most. Sarah Chen sat in the building's community room, wrapped in a blanket that couldn't stop her shaking. Her clothes were soaked with rain and blood, her dark hair plastered to her skull. She'd been talking non-stop since the first responders arrived, but her account kept shifting in small, troubling ways. Walk me through it again, Castellanos said, settling into the chair across from her. His partner, Detective Maria Santos, leaned against the wall, notepad ready. You arrived at what time? Around midnight? Maybe 11:50? Sarah's voice was hoarse from crying. I parked in the visitor space and went straight up to Marcus's apartment. And he was alive when you arrived? Yes, of course he was alive. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. We talked. He made me tea. We were watching a movie. What movie? Sarah hesitated. I don't remember. Something on Netflix. I was tired from the drive. Castellanos made a note. It was the 3rd time she'd changed details about the evening's timeline. Then what happened? I went to take a shower. When I came out, double quotes, her voice broke. When I came out, he was on the floor. There was so much blood. How long were you in the shower? I don't know. 20 minutes? Half an hour. Santos spoke up from her position by the wall. The responding officers said you were in the lobby when they arrived, not upstairs with the body. Sarah's eyes darted between the 2 detectives. I ran downstairs to call for help. My phone was dead, and I panicked. Your phone was dead? Castellanos pulled out an evidence bag containing Sarah's iPhone. This phone? Because our tech guy says it has 60% battery. The color drained from Sarah's face. I meant, it felt dead. The signal was bad upstairs. I couldn't think straight. Castellanos leaned forward. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you and Marcus have an argument tonight? No. We were happy. We were talking about me moving here after graduation. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dried blood. Why are you asking me these questions? I told you what happened. That woman outside, she was tampering with my car. She must have followed me upstairs. Tell me about this woman. Karen something. Marcus warned me about her when I arrived. Said she was obsessed with parking enforcement, always harassing visitors. Sarah's voice grew stronger, more confident. I saw her by my car when I looked out the window. She was doing something to my tires. Santos flipped through her notes. What time was this? Right before one found Marcus. Maybe 12:30? Castellanos felt the familiar itch that meant pieces weren't fitting together. You said you were in the shower for 20 to 30 minutes, starting around midnight. But you also said you saw this woman by your car at 12:30, right before finding Marcus's body. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The timeline is confusing. I was in shock. Here's what's confusing me. Castellanos continued. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment puts time of death between 12:15 and 12:45. If you were in the shower when Marcus was killed, and you saw this Karen woman by your car right before finding the body, that means she was outside while Marcus was being murdered upstairs. She could have gone up first, then gone outside to establish an alibi. Santos stepped closer. Sarah, we need to process your hands for gunshot residue and take photographs of any injuries. I don't have any injuries. And why would you test? For gunshot residue, Marcus was stabbed. The room fell silent. Castellanos watched Sarah's face carefully as the implication of her words settled in. We didn't tell you how Marcus died, he said quietly. Sarah's eyes went wide. When I found him, there was a knife. I could see the knife was buried to the hilt in his chest. From your position in the doorway, you wouldn't have been able to see what caused the wound. I don't understand what you're trying to say. But Castellanos could see that she understood perfectly. I'm saying that someone who just discovered a body wouldn't immediately know the cause of death unless they'd witnessed it happening, or caused it themselves. Sarah shot to her feet, the blanket falling to the floor. This is insane. I loved Marcus. I would never hurt him. Then help us understand what really happened tonight. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock on the community room door. Officer Jenny Park stuck her head inside. Detective Castellanos? We found the other woman, Karen Martinez from Building A. She's asking to speak with you. Bring her. In a moment later, Karen Martinez entered the room like she owned it. Even soaked from the storm, she carried herself with an authority that filled the space. Her eyes immediately locked onto Sarah. That's her, Karen said, pointing. That's the woman who threatened me. I never threatened you. Sarah's voice cracked with hysteria. You were sabotaging my car. Karen turned to Castellanos with the practiced composure of someone accustomed to being listened to. Detective, I need to report an incident. This woman accosted me in the lobby and accused me of murdering her boyfriend. She was covered in blood and acting erratically. What were you doing outside in the storm, Ms. Martinez? I was documenting illegal parking activity. This woman's vehicle has been in visitor parking since before midnight, which violates community standards. Santos consulted her notes. According to the property manager, there's no time limit on visitor parking. Karen's expression hardened. The property manager is naive about the kind of problems overnight visitors create. I've lived in this complex for 8 years. I know what leads to criminal activity. And what did you observe while you were documenting this parking violation? I saw lights go on in Building C around 12:30. Then I heard screaming. When I went to investigate, this woman accused me of tampering with her vehicle and blamed me for whatever happened upstairs. Castellanos studied both women, Sarah young and terrified, blood on her clothes, and inconsistencies in her story. Karen, older and controlled, with answers that seemed almost too prepared. Ms. Martinez, did you interact with the victim at any point this evening? I've never spoken to Marcus Williams in my life, but you know his name. Karen didn't miss a beat. It's on the parking permit in the Honda's windshield. Sarah says she saw you tampering with her car. Specifically, she mentioned you doing something to her tires. That's ridiculous. I was taking photographs to document the parking violation. This woman is obviously trying to deflect suspicion from herself. Sarah lunged toward Karen, but Santos caught her arm. She's lying. She had some kind of tool. She was letting air out of my tires. Do you have any evidence of this alleged tampering? Castellanos asked. Sarah's face crumpled. I didn't check the tires after I saw her. Marcus was already ... double quotes. She dissolved into fresh sobs. Karen's voice cut through Sarah's crying like a blade. Detective, I think it's obvious what happened here. This young woman drove through a storm to visit her boyfriend. They argued probably about her moving here, which creates pressure in long-distance relationships. The argument escalated, she lost control, and now she's looking for someone else to blame. That's not what happened. Then explain the inconsistencies in your timeline. Karen continued remorselessly. Explain how you knew Marcus was stabbed when the wound wasn't visible from the doorway. Explain why you ran downstairs instead of calling 911 from the apartment. Castellanos watched the exchange with growing unease. Karen Martinez was doing his job for him, pointing out exactly the discrepancies that bothered him about Sarah's story, but something in her manner too helpful to prepare to set off alarm bells. Ms. Martinez, I'd like you to wait in the lobby while we finish with Ms. Chen. Of course, Detective, I'm happy to cooperate in any way that helps you find the truth. After Karen left, Sarah collapsed back into her chair. She's playing you, can't you see that? She's manipulating the whole situation. Help me understand how? I don't know how. But Marcus warned me about her. He said she was obsessed with controlling everyone in the complex. The way she just laid out that whole theory about our relationship, how could she know any of that unless she'd been watching us? Santos looked up from her notes. You said Marcus warned you about her when you arrived. What exactly did he say? Sarah wiped her eyes, thinking he said she takes pictures of cars she doesn't recognize, calls towing companies. He said the property manager told her to back off, but she keeps doing it anyway. Anything else? He seemed nervous when I told him where I parked, like he was worried about something. Castellanos felt another piece of the puzzle shift. Nervous. We tried to hide it, but I could tell. He suggested I move my car to a different spot, but I said it was fine since I was legally parked. Sarah's voice grew quiet. Maybe if I'd listened to him, Sarah, I need to ask you directly. Did you kill Marcus Williams? She met his eyes without flinching. No, I loved him. We were planning a future together. Then why did you lie about your phone being dead? I wasn't lying. I was confused. When you find someone you love covered in blood. Karen Martinez entered the community room for the second time that night with the same commanding presence. But Detective Castellanos noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she sat down. The tire pressure gauge lay on the table between them, like an accusation. Ms. Martinez, can you explain how your tire pressure gauge ended up behind Ms. Chen's license plate? Karen stared at the evidence bag, her carefully constructed composure cracking for the first time. That's impossible. My gauge is in my car. We checked your vehicle. No tire pressure gauge. Then someone stole it. Karen's voice sharpened. She must have taken it from my car and planted it to frame me. Sarah shot forward in her chair. How would I even know you had a tire pressure gauge? I'd never seen you before tonight. Ladies, please. Castellanos held up a hand. Ms. Martinez, when did you last see your tire pressure gauge? I don't remember exactly. I don't use it often. Santos consulted her notes. But you're very detail-oriented about property maintenance. Your Facebook posts show you documenting various violations with photographic evidence. Seems like someone that organized would know when their tools went missing. Karen's jaw tightened. Detective, are you seriously going to take the word of a murderer over a law-abiding citizen who's trying to help your investigation? I'm trying to establish facts. And the fact is, your tire pressure gauge was used to vandalize Ms. Chen's vehicle during the approximate time of Marcus Williams' death. Approximate time? Karen pounced on the word. So you don't know exactly when he died. Castellanos studied her carefully. Most people would be focused on defending themselves. Karen was looking for holes in the investigation. The medical examiner puts time of death between 12:15 and 12:45. You claim you were outside documenting parking violations during that window. I have photographs timestamped from my phone. Show me. Karen pulled out her iPhone and scrolled through her photos. Here at 12:18 a.m., photograph of the Honda's license plate. 12:21. Another angle showing the visitor parking sign. 12:24. Close-up of the parking permit. Santos leaned over to examine the phone. These photos are all from the same position. You didn't move around the vehicle. I was being thorough in my documentation, but the tire gauge was found behind the rear license plate. You would have had to walk around the car to deflate the front tires? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since entering the room, she had no immediate answer. Sarah's voice cut through the silence. She's lying about the timeline. She was tampering with my car before she took those photos. She deflated the tires first, then created fake evidence to cover herself. That's ridiculous. Why would I need to cover myself for documenting illegal parking? Because you weren't just documenting, you were planning something worse. Castellanos felt the familiar electricity that came when a case began to break open. Ms. Martinez, did you enter Building C at any point tonight? Absolutely not. Did you have any interaction with Marcus Williams beyond seeing his name on the parking permit? None whatsoever. Then you won't mind if we search your apartment for evidence connecting you to the victim. Karen's confidence faltered. You need a warrant for that. Actually, I don't need a warrant if you consent to the search. People with nothing to hide usually agree to help the investigation. The room fell quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Karen looked from Castellanos to Santos, then to Sarah, who was watching her with intense focus. I want to speak to a lawyer. Sarah laughed, a bitter sound. Now she wants a lawyer. Innocent people don't need lawyers, right, Karen? Isn't that what you'd say if I asked for one? Ms. Chen makes a good point, Santos observed. You've been very eager to help our investigation until we asked to search your apartment. Karen stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. I'm a victim of harassment and attempted freeing-up. When my attorney reviews this interrogation, you'll both be looking for new jobs. But as she moved toward the door, Castellanos played his trump card. Sit down, Ms. Martinez. Something in his tone made Karen freeze. We found something else in your apartment building, something you didn't count on. Karen slowly turned around. What are you talking about? Building C has security cameras in the stairwells. Installed last month after a break-in on the second floor. The property manager forgot to mention them in the lease updates. The color drained from Karen's face. Would you like to revise your statement about never entering Building C? Karen sank back into her chair like a deflating balloon. For a long moment, the only sound was her ragged breathing. I want to make a deal, she whispered. Sarah leaned forward. What kind of deal? Not with you. Karen's eyes fixed on Castellanos with the police. I'll tell you what really happened, but I want immunity. That's not how this works. Santos said. You don't get to negotiate immunity after we've caught you lying. You haven't caught me doing anything. You have circumstantial evidence and a lot of theories. Castellanos pulled out his phone and scrolled to a video file. Let's see what the security camera shows. He pressed play, and grainy black and white footage filled the screen. A timestamp in the corner read 12:08 a.m. The video showed the third-floor stairwell of Building C, empty and quiet. At 12:11, a figure appeared at the bottom of the frame, climbing the stairs. The person wore a dark rain jacket with the hood up, obscuring their face, but the build and gait were clearly female. That could be anyone, Karen said, but her voice lacked conviction. The figure reached the third floor and disappeared from view. At 12:19, the same hooded figure reappeared, moving quickly down the stairs. But this time, there was something different about their movement. Urgent. Panicked. Interesting timing, Castellanos observed. This person entered the building right around the time you claim you were taking your first photograph, and left, just before your 12:21 timestamp. Sarah stared at the screen. That's not me. I was in the apartment the whole time. We know it's not you. The person in this video is too tall to be you, and they're wearing different clothes. Castellanos paused the video on a frame showing the figure's profile, but they're about the same height and build as Ms. Martinez. Karen was shaking now, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The really interesting part, Santos continued, is what happened after this person left the building. Our tech team enhanced the footage and tracked their movement. Across the parking lot, she took out her own phone and showed another video file. This one showed the parking area from a different angle. The hooded figure moved quickly toward Building A, but stopped beside the Honda Civic. This is where you deflated the tires, Castellanos said. After you killed Marcus Williams. I didn't kill anyone. Karen's composure finally shattered completely. Yes, I went upstairs. Yes, I confronted him. But he was alive when I left. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Why? Why did you go up there? Karen looked at her with pure hatred. Because of people like you, entitled, inconsiderate people who think the rules don't apply to them. You park wherever you want, stay as long as you want, with no thought for the community you're disrupting. So you decided to what? Teach Marcus a lesson? I decided to make it clear that your overnight visits weren't welcome. I went upstairs to tell him to move your car, or I'd have it towed. Castellanos leaned forward. And what happened when you knocked on his door? Karen's voice became distant, like she was reliving the encounter. He answered in his pajamas. I explained the situation, showed him the photos I'd taken of the Honda, told him that overnight visitor parking was disruptive to the community. How did he respond? He was, dismissive. Said there was no rule against overnight parking. Said I needed to mind my own business. Karen's hands clenched into fists. He actually laughed at me. Said I was a crazy old woman with too much time on my hands. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. That doesn't sound like Marcus. Doesn't it? Karen's smile was vicious. Your precious boyfriend wasn't the sweet man you thought he was. He called me pathetic. Said no wonder my husband left me for someone younger. The words hung in the air like poison. Castellanos watched both women carefully. How did Marcus know about your divorce? Karen's face went blank. He must have heard gossip around the complex, or he told him. Why would I tell a stranger about my personal life? Because this wasn't your first conversation with Marcus Williams, was it? Karen said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Santos pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. We ran a background check on both of you. Turns out you have more in common than either of you mentioned. She placed a document on the table. Marcus Williams, employment history. Up until 6 months ago, he worked at Premier Property Management, the same company that manages apartments. Sarah stared at the document. Marcus never told me he worked in property management. According to his former supervisor, Marcus was terminated for inappropriate conduct with a tenant, specifically, for accepting gifts and favors in exchange for overlooking lease violations. Karen's face had gone ashen. The tenant in question, Santos continued, was Karen Martinez. She'd been filing excessive complaints about noise, parking, and maintenance issues. Marcus was assigned to handle her case. Castellanos picked up the thread. The silence in the community room was deafening. Sarah stared at Karen with an expression that had shifted from grief to something far more dangerous. Detective Castellanos felt the case crystallizing around him like ice forming on a windshield. What exactly are you saying, Ms. Martinez? Karen never took her eyes off Sarah. I'm saying that when Marcus pulled out that knife and threatened to call the police, we heard the shower turn off. He went white as a sheet, started whispering for me to hide in the bedroom until Sarah went back to sleep. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. That's not what happened, isn't it? Karen leaned forward. You came out of that bathroom earlier than expected, didn't you? Heard voices in the living room? Maybe you thought Marcus was watching TV, so you decided to surprise him. Castellanos watched Sarah's face carefully. The grief and confusion were gone, replaced by something calculating. Instead, Karen continued, you found your boyfriend of 3 years arguing with another woman in his apartment at 12:30 in the morning? A woman who was clearly comfortable enough to be there in the middle of the night? Santos stepped closer to Sarah. Is that what happened? You discovered the affair. No, but Sarah's denial lacked the conviction it had carried all night. Karen, it smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Marcus panicked when he heard you come in. He shoved the knife into my hands and whispered that I needed to leave through the balcony, but it was too late. You walked into that living room and saw us together. Stop. The look on your face, Karen said, her voice gaining strength. Pure betrayal? Pure rage. You asked who I was, and Marcus ... Poor Marcus tried to lie. Said I was from the property management company. They're about a complaint. Castellanos pulled out his notebook. Every detail Karen provided could be verified or disproven. What happened next? Sarah didn't believe him. She was too smart for that. She looked at me, then at Marcus, and you could see her putting it together. The way I was dressed, the time of night, the panic in Marcus's voice. Sarah stood up abruptly. I want a lawyer. Right now. Sit down, Santos commanded. I don't have to listen to this psychotic woman's fantasies. But Karen wasn't finished. You asked how long it had been going on. Marcus tried to minimize it, said, it was nothing, just a few casual dates. But I was so angry at being dismissed, being treated like some dirty secret, that I told you the truth, which was, that we'd been together for months, that he'd told me he was going to break up with you this weekend, that he'd said you were just a college girlfriend he'd outgrown. Castellanos saw Sarah's hands begin to shake. And how did Ms. Chen react to this information? She looked at Marcus like he was a stranger, asked if it was true, and Marcus ... Marcus made the biggest mistake of his life. He told her yes. The room fell silent except for the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. He said he'd been trying to find the right way to tell you, that long-distance relationships don't work, that he'd found someone who could actually be there for him. Sarah's voice cracked. Stop talking. You started crying. Asked how he could do this to you, how he could let you drive through a storm to be humiliated. Marcus tried to comfort you, but you pushed him away. Santos moved closer to Sarah. Ms. Chen, I need you to remain calm. But Sarah was beyond calm. She's making this up. She killed Marcus, and now she's trying to pin it on me. Karen shook her head. You grabbed the knife out of my hands. You were sobbing, asking Marcus how he could throw away 3 years for some old woman he barely knew. That's not. Marcus tried to take the knife away from you. He was saying your name, trying to get you to put it down. But you were in a rage. You kept asking why you weren't enough, why he needed someone else. Castellanos felt the final pieces clicking into place, and that's when Ms. Chen stabbed him. It happened so fast. 1 second they were struggling over the knife, the next second Marcus was falling backward with blood spreading across his chest. Sarah's facade finally cracked completely. He destroyed my life. 3 years of planning a future together, 3 years of turning down other opportunities because I thought we were building something real, and for what? For some pathetic old woman who harasses people about parking spaces. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Santos immediately moved behind Sarah while Castellanos reached for his handcuffs. Sarah, Chen, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Williams. But Sarah wasn't finished. As Santos began reading her rights, she turned to Karen with pure venom in her eyes. You think you've won. You think destroying my life makes you the hero of this story. Karen said nothing, but her hands were shaking. Marcus was using you, Sarah continued as Castellanos secured the handcuffs. He told me about you months ago. The crazy woman in Building A who kept filing complaints. He said sleeping with you was the easiest way to get you to back off. Karen's face went white. That's not true. He called you his project, Sep. You were so desperate for attention that you'd believe anything. He was going to dump you as soon as I graduated and moved here permanently. You're lying, Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Why would I lie now? I'm already going to prison, but at least I can make sure you know the truth about your precious Marcus. Karen stood up on unsteady legs. He loved me, he said. He said whatever you needed to hear to keep you manageable. God, you're pathetic. A grown woman so lonely that you'd believe a man 20 years younger actually wanted you. Santos tried to guide Sarah toward the door, but she resisted, determined to deliver her final blow. You want to know what really happened tonight? Marcus was going to break up with both of us. He'd already accepted a job in Seattle. He was planning to disappear and start over somewhere else. The words hit Karen like a physical assault. She sank back into her chair, all the fight gone out of her. Check his email, Sarah continued mercilessly. Check his browser history. You'll find the apartment listings, the job applications, the plane ticket he bought for next week. He was done with both of us. Castellanos looked at Karen, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the past minute. Ms. Martinez, is there anything else you need to tell us? Karen stared at the floor. When she spoke, her voice was hollow. After Sarah stabbed him, she just stood there staring at what she'd done. The knife was still in her hand, covered in blood. I tried to help Marcus, but there was so much blood. Why didn't you call 911? Sarah begged me not to. She said it was an accident, that she'd never meant to hurt him. She said if I called the police, both our lives would be ruined. Santos paused in the doorway. So you agreed to help cover up a murder. She said she had a plan. Then she'd wait a few minutes, then call the police herself. Make it look like she'd discovered the body. I was supposed to go back to my apartment and pretend I'd never been there. But you couldn't resist tampering with her car. Karen's laugh was bitter. I was so angry. At her, at Marcus, at myself for being such a fool. Deflating her tires seemed like such a small revenge after everything she'd taken from me. Castellano shook his head. Instead, you created evidence that led us to the truth. The truth. Karen looked up at Sarah, who was watching her with cold satisfaction. The truth is that we're both pathetic. Two women who loved a man who was incapable of loving anyone but himself. As Santos led Sarah out of the community room, she called back over her shoulder, "Don't forget to check his phone. Karen, you'll find some very interesting text messages about his crazy stalker neighbor." The door closed behind them, leaving Karen alone with Castellanos. She sat in the harsh fluorescent light, surrounded by the debris of her shattered illusions. Ms. Martinez, you'll need to come to the station to give a formal statement, and there will likely be charges for tampering with evidence and failing to report a crime. Karen nodded absently. Detective, can I ask you something? What's it? In all your years of police work, have you ever seen anyone destroy their entire life over a parking space? Castellanos considered the question. No, ma'am, but I've seen people destroy their lives over much less. As they prepared to leave the community room, Karen took one last look at the evidence bags on the table. Her tire pressure gauge, the photographs from her phone, the security camera footage that had unraveled everything. You know what the real irony is? She said quietly. What's that? Sarah's car was legally parked the entire time. She never violated a single rule. Karen's smile was sad and empty. I started this whole thing because I couldn't stand the idea of someone getting away with breaking the rules. Turns out, the only rules that got broken were the ones I broke. Myself. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The parking lot was quiet, puddles reflecting the streetlights like scattered mirrors. Sarah's Honda Civic sat exactly where she'd left it, still legally parked in visitor space number 4. By morning, it would be towed as evidence in a murder case. But as Detective Castellanos walked Karen Martinez to his patrol car, he couldn't help thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A young woman's desire to visit her boyfriend, an older woman's obsession with parking enforcement, a man's inability to be honest with either of the women in his life. In the end, it hadn't been about parking at all. It had been about loneliness, betrayal, and the terrible things people do when they discover that the life they thought that